So the way we're going to do this is we're going to do 3 presentations. And these guys are going to stay up here, and then we'll have questions for 5 minutes. And then we'll bring the next 3 up and do the same thing. The first time we did this, it was a lot of fun, but we did all 12 in a row, and it made it really hard for questions at the end. So we decided to break it up this time, and we're going to get started. And so, and these guys are on a timer, so as soon as it starts, and they don't have any control over it. So the slides advance every 15 seconds, and so hopefully they've prepared well.
And didn't you say we had like a minute to set up before we talk, like before it starts?
Well, hop up here. You're first. So as soon as you see it on there, I guess go ahead and have a seat, guys.
Okay.
So the first talk is Jason Barrett, who's going to talk about from Mississippi State. Should mention that giving well owners multiple options of service.
Yes. Can y'all hear me in the back? Y'all, you two in the back. Can y'all hear me great? Okay. Well, I was told by Steve before this started we had a little time to set up, so I did one of these back in 17. It was mainly about where are we and how we got started. And this is, I'm going to say, kind of a progression and moved forward in where we are and what we've been doing, and just my mindset on if you are going to do some type of well owner program, think about what options you have for your well owners. Okay. So, okay. All right. Giving well owners options in Mississippi, again, as I was stating, that's to me kind of the crucial thing. The biggest question is, what are the options? And when we start thinking about options, the things we start thinking about agencies, educations, publications, technical assistance, and screening. The groups that have helped me along the way, as you see here, State Department of Health, Private Well Class, Communities Unlimited, Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, the Small Business Environmental Assistance Program. All of their logos are there. Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, they have been a phenomenal resource. For one, they license our well drillers, plus they permit wells throughout the state, even though private wells are not permitted in Mississippi. Mississippi State Department of Health, Division of On-Site Wastewater, they're a huge, I must say, benefit to us. Private well class, really my go-to for people that have any questions related to private wells because of all the information that's at that site. Communities Unlimited, they also serve Mississippi. Looking at Mississippi, we actually have a pretty, I guess, good spread of private wells throughout the state. We have about 58 counties that possess some type of population of private well owners throughout the state. Only a handful have very large, and they're really concentrated, as you can see, kind of north, central, south. Our coastal area is really kind of a hotbed of private wells. Large population of our state is on the coast, and as a result, we tend to have a lot of private wells for some reason. Moving forward, one of the reasons I see for importance is what you're looking at here. We've really been stagnant about the last 30 years on the percentage of our population on private wells. It's not going down. So being able to provide resources to those people and population is something we really need to do. So one of the things when we start talking about educational pieces, this is actually how to collect a sample, because that's a question a lot of people had without being able to use a private lab or some other entity to draw it themselves to turn it into a lab. So we've created that. We used some Texas A&M information. This actually is a graphic of the actual well design criteria for Mississippi that did not exist prior to us doing this, and I got this idea from some of the Virginia Tech, Texas A&M folks as well. And some of these publications you're seeing are some that we've created since the previous private well conference. Managing household wastewater, this is another thing we've seen dovetail into private well owners, because everyone in Mississippi that has a private well has their own septic system. So we kind of need to feed this information into our trainings. And then also when we start talking about setback distances, Mississippi Code really only had 2 criteria. There were items that people needed to make sure they were a certain distance away from the well. So we adapted this from Minnesota, extracted a lot of things that didn't relate to Mississippi, and then just plugged in what we had. Also, dealing with technical assistance, being able to provide those people options. I'll actually do a lot myself. This is drawing a sample from a home well here. A lot of what we do is collect samples for people to screen for bacteria. Our Mississippi Department of Ag also has some programs with growers for certification, so we try to make sure they're bacteria-free as well. So pulling some samples on some small truck crop. This here is actually a blueberry farm. Very good people, but have no idea the quality of the water that's being put out. Here you have some hoop houses. These people are growing some tomatoes. And then on the right there, that's actually the old well that was on the home site. It's very interesting because if you see to the right, the actual can that they would lower and draw water out. Very interesting old site to be, but they'd replaced it with a new well. What we're seeing in Mississippi, our average well age is about 20 years. Almost all of them are domestic. Almost all of them are drilled. And again, you see about 80% have zero treatment. If any, it's a little bit of sediment removal, but no bacteria at all. Dealing with bacteria screenings, I always try to give people the least cost options first. So our Division of On-Site Wastewater, they offer it for about $10. They actually have an online portal. As you can see, the Healthy Mississippi www apply. So I try to focus people to that one first, and then I may show them what we could do. When usually we handle those through our trainings where we are actually on site. People bring the water to us, and then we take it back to campus to screen and then send them the results. Another option is dealing with actual certified labs throughout the state. That's usually the hardest and most expensive option for people. That's usually why I recommend it last. But again, it is an option. I like to make people aware of it. What we've seen over the last couple of years, I'm going to say that's probably that's very consistent with the state drawing them. If you notice there, about 37% of our samples are coming back with total coliform bacteria, and I'm seeing consistent numbers in Texas, Virginia as well, which are very alarming to me, even though this is only in 33 counties, but again, probably the counties that we've done workshops in. That is me, Jason Barrett, Mississippi State University. Thank y'all. It's good to be here.
Good job. All right. Great job. Jim, you're next. It'll take him a second to get it up, so if you have something you want to add, you get a little free time at the beginning here.
Well, I'm going to be speaking about partnerships with environmental health associations, the state environmental health associations, and touching upon other partnerships as well. They've been vital since they started the private well program at RCAP, and just wanted to do a little piece on it. So like I said, Jim Starbard, Massachusetts State Lead, and since about 6 years now, we're working with the environmental health associations in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and it's been really great to help get the word out about the program. A little bit on RCAP's private well program, for you to understand what it is. It's training for sanitarians and homeowners, well assessments, and we're a partner of the National Environmental Health Association. That's why I'm concentrating on the state environmental health associations, which are the state equivalents. So why do with them? Well, they are the audience. You know, they represent the meeting who we're trying to get to, the health officers, the sanitarians. They market to their members, and things just do great. The members learn about the program, get buy-in, and with the well assessments, give it to the community. Credibility. Environmental health associations are credible. They're already known to give out CEUs. They already do trainings. They represent the interest of the sanitarians. And they'll share the program details with their communities. So it gets you the well assessments and the homeowner trainings. Other perks, being an EPA-funded program, we can't pay for any food, coffee, anything. The Environmental Health Associations, unsolicited, have actually donated refreshments for these trainings. So it's an extra perk that we weren't expecting, but it's been great. They advertise the well assessment program in the local community. It's huge to get the well assessments to the homeowners really in need. You know, it's not really just the educational, but we get a lot of referrals for people in need, people with coliform issues, high iron and manganese, dioxin, you name it. So it's really getting those well assessments to the things. Other perks is local grant applications and other further program work. We have a lot of applications to other state and even foundations, so they're supported. So I'm going to talk about Mass Environmental Health Association's the one that I've been a member since 2002. They actually gave me a scholarship to go to grad school, so they're great to my heart. But they've been a great partner. They've been the number one partner. We've done 3 trainings together already. We've got a 4th coming up next month. The registration's been full for all the events, so we really haven't done many advertising for it. Really just kind of fills up for us. And I've been a member since 2002, and it's very fulfilling. Just an example, we have a sanitarian training plan for June 12th. They'd advertise it on April 12th through their network. We filled up 41 seats filled in overnight. And lunch and dinner, lunch and breakfast is going to be sponsored by them. Connecticut Environmental Association is another one we've been working with. We've done one We've done a training with them so far. We're looking to do more in the future. They represent the Connecticut sanitarians, and they've been a strong advocate for our work. We're also a member with CHAR. CHAR allows that RCAP Solution be a corporate member and also being a voting member. So our Connecticut rep down there actually attends board meetings and votes, and so it's been a great relationship there. Other partners too, Mass DEP, Rhode Island Department of Public Health, Connecticut Department of Public Health, been great. They attend our trainings, they speak at our trainings, they give us referrals, a lot of different ways to help further our program. So, other partners in Massachusetts, we have Health Officers Association as well, because we have a health officer license. The Western Public Health Association is more for the western part of the state, which is a lot more rural than the rest of the state, so they have their own kind of association. Other partners, USDA Rural Development, they really have the only funding available to assist well owners in my area to fix their wells. And they also are speaking at our private well trainings to give some kind of resources to the local health agents when they come across issues. Other partners, well drillers, treatment providers, little by little they're coming aboard. We're actually starting to become like a second set of eyes. If they can't figure it out, they'll actually call us in and we'll do a well assessment and kind of put our heads together, try to figure it out. So that's also been a good way. Future initiatives, like I mentioned yesterday, Massachusetts, our regulations, well regulations by local boards of health. So we're really looking to help those boards of health implement regulations and actually come to a statewide regulation in Massachusetts like all our other public health regulations. Water sampling to well assessment program, that's one thing we'd like to add is get funding to actually do a water sample when we do a well assessment. And then go back to that homeowner with the results and talk through it. So it's one of the initiatives that we've been supported. We're also looking to start a revolving loan fund for private wells. We get a lot of calls for people that need money to assist their private well, but they don't meet the rural development criteria, so we're trying to find a way to fund those as well. And in closing, if you ever saw me 2 years ago, this is when I glowed about being from Massachusetts, the title town of the country. Go Bees, because Boston likes to do championships in threes. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Our third presenter in this first session is Andy Yencha from Penn State Extension, and he's talking about achieving more good than harm, a proposed risk assessment to help well owners evaluate groundwater contamination from pesticide applications. All right.
All right, thank you.
As soon as you see it, you're more than...
All right, this is my first time. It's a little bit like NASCAR, right? You're here to watch crash and burn. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, right. Oh, okay. All set. I haven't been wearing glasses long, so this is interesting. We're rolling. All right. Well, this talk explores the merit and feasibility of developing a risk assessment that homeowners can use. It's a proposed risk assessment to rate the hazard posed by pesticide applications near their well. The question I have is, would such a tool do more harm than good? As a Penn State educator, I get this question a lot. My neighbor is spraying pesticides near my home. Is my water safe to drink? Homeowners who ask this question usually worry the risk is great, but studies point to the fact that it's usually not. Pesticide levels in wells exceeding federal health standards are rare, so the actual risk appears to be small. But there are two buts. We can say the risk is zero because pesticide contamination exceeding health advisories does happen. So we have to worry about that. Plus, there is limited epidemiological research on it. So the fact is we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes it seems like a real ethical dilemma when you wade into these kind of gray areas with the folks who are calling us worried about those applications. So it occurred to me that maybe if we developed a simple questionnaire, we could help people work through this on their own. And bonus, such a questionnaire would also help people better understand where their water comes from, how their water system works, and what steps they should be taking to protect this water system. So I Googled risk assessment, and it turns out there are a lot of risk assessments out there covering a wide variety of fields. There are so many, in fact, that I had to step back and review what the word risk assessment means when it's used as a noun. And good news, all the listed meanings apply when your well is contaminated. So this was encouraging. I felt like I was focused on the same risks that homeowners were, but what homeowners lack, I think anyway, is a good understanding of the cultural, physical, and biological factors that must come together to really create a significant risk. So could a do-it-yourself risk assessment successfully help well owners gain a more informed perspective without causing undue alarm? Well, maybe it could. I don't think a simple assessment could provide the level of understanding that, say, some quality classroom time with a groundwater model could, but maybe that level of knowledge is not necessary. Maybe all that's needed is a course level of knowledge, like what's really happening out there, where's it happening, and how is it happening. So I decided the assessment should meet 5 critical standards. It should be qualitative, it should be quick, it should be comprehensive, it needs to be conservative, and it can't be conclusive. So the next slides will get into these 5 standards. All right. So one well-known risk assessment tool that is out there, and maybe some of you have heard about, are the Home Assist and Pharmacist guides. And they use a simple rating scale of low, medium, or high risk to explore a variety of potential hazards. This is a type of qualitative scale that I think might work, although I think elevated risk is probably better than high risk. So it also needs to be quick. That means the fewer questions, the better. The tool needs to just have enough questions to effectively identify coarse hazards. We're talking coarse hazards. And it needs to be simple, written in language that's understandable. The next 3 slides are going to look at comprehensive. Keeping it comprehensive, which seems a little contradictory. But it would look at things like the rate and manner which the application happens, the timing, and the distance from the well. And then the next ones would be questions designed to get at the vulnerabilities based on the location of the water supply, whether it's a well or a spring or whatever. So we'll look at factors like topography and geology, and not listed here, but very important, my omission, are soils. So it would have to have some questions in there about soils. And the final comprehensive factor would be well construction features. Such as depth of bedrock and whether there's a grout seal or not, things that we've been talking about this whole 2 days so far. To avoid false negatives, I think the assessment should encourage well owners to err on the side of caution when assigning these risk values. This means that their final results may contain a fair number of medium or elevated hazard ratings, and this could possibly lead to an unwarranted sense of overall risk. So maybe weighing certain questions more than others could be a way around this problem. I'm not sure. My guess is that simply coarsely comprehensive risk assessment would probably ease the worries of those people who frantically call me with that neighbor question. So that's good news. But for people who just stumbled on this assessment, it might make them more worried than they were before. So maybe that's good. We meet in the middle. The essential takeaway is that for both audience, the assessment tool won't be conclusive, just educational. And education ultimately leads to action, positive action. And my guess, it was information and education that motivated this particular Pennsylvania applicator to do the difficult but right thing and transport their empty pesticide containers to a state recycling drop-off. So, thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for any of our speakers so far? There are none on Slido. I just posted no questions, but I don't think it's come up yet. Okay, yes?
Jim, you said you were looking at doing water sampling. Have you identified a funding source?
So the question was, Jim's talking about doing sampling. Has he identified a funding source?
We're applying to a local foundation in central Massachusetts.
Here, use a mic.
We're applying to a local foundation in central Massachusetts, so hoping that funding will come through to add that on it, but that's going to be part of the proposal for it.
Any other questions? All right. Give these gentlemen a hand. Okay, our next 3 talks are both of you coming up, Andrea? Just you? Okay. Andrea Albertin, Pham, and Eric Larsen. All right, and you're first. So Andrea's going to talk about private wells and emergency response in Florida, which certainly is an interesting topic.
started. My name is Andrea Albertin. My colleague is Ling, and we're with the University of Florida IFAS Extension. About 2.5 million Floridians, that's approximately 12% of our population, relies on private wells for home consumption. Dark purple parcels here indicate known wells. Light purple indicate likely wells. So you can see that our wells are spread throughout most of the state, save the coastlines where we have our highest populations, and save South Florida. We also have a lot of hurricanes in Florida. So since I started with UF Extension, we've had Hermine hit as a Category 1 in the Florida Panhandle. We had Irma hit in 2017 as a Category 4. Florida Keys made all the way north through the peninsula. And then just recently in 2018, Hurricane Michael hit the Panhandle as a Category 5 and pretty much destroyed large swaths of the Panhandle and into southern Georgia. So I'm going to focus on emergency response after Hurricane Irma. In 2017, just days before Irma was about to hit, we were invited by Virginia Tech to collaborate on an NSF Rapid Research Grant. We wanted to help homeowners affected by by the hurricane, and we also wanted to look at two major questions. So were private wells contaminated after Irma, and what resources did well users want during recovery? So Virginia Tech made available about 500 sampling kits for Florida. They offered free analysis for total coliform and E. coli, as well as a suite of inorganic analytes. So respondents in return were asked to fill out a survey. Okay, so who responded? So communication after a hurricane is really difficult. So as best we could through our internal extension network, I spread the word that this was available, and 6 extension agents let me know that they wanted to conduct a sampling campaign in their respective counties. These are shown here in red. At the same time, the Department of Health was also offering free sampling in 23 counties. 3 of the same overlapped, actually. So for our sampling campaigns, what the extension agents did was they advertised through press releases. Sample kits were picked up and dropped off at specific locations, and then they were shipped overnight to Virginia Tech for analysis. In some cases, residents in nearby counties also submitted samples. So a total of 179 well water samples were analyzed, and 178 surveys were filled out, which was pretty good. Next, I'll go over just a few of the results. So in terms of microbial water quality, percent samples that tested positive for total coliform are in blue, E. coli in orange, and it's by county. So it did vary by county, but overall, on your right, you'll see that out of 154 valid samples, 38% tested positive for total coliform and 2% for E. coli. We're using the responses from the surveys to inform future emergency response. So one of the questions we asked was simply, how did you hear about this testing opportunity? 25% said that through community and family networks. Remember that communication is very difficult after a storm. The next 3 were really local news sources. So basically, press releases put out by extension agents were often picked up by local news, and then this was further spread through community networks, which makes a lot of sense. We also asked residents, hey, what is the best way to provide you with information both before a storm, that's in light blue, as well as after a storm in dark blue? And you'll notice that the first 4 responses, the top responses, were email, US mail, phone calls, and text messages. These are all really personal ways to receive information, right? They want to receive the information directly. They want it sent to them. Challenge with this is that directly after a storm and maybe a month or more thereafter, it's difficult to do because communication lines can be down. But they do want that one-on-one. Probably also want a contact to ask questions to and to respond to. So finally, one of the great things about that sampling was that it helped jumpstart the well owner education program in Marion County that my counterpart, Ling, runs. So basically what she does is she hosts a 2-hour seminar every month, and the Department of Health, she partners with Department of Health. They offer free well testing for bacteria for attendees. And what Ling is essentially doing with the Department of Health is building that network of private well users that she can contact directly and that they can communicate directly with in case of future emergencies, which is what we want to replicate throughout Florida. Thank you.
So everybody noticed what she did there, right? So almost every slide, there were 2 of them. So she did 10 slides, 30 seconds long, basically, instead of 20, 15-minute ones, which is very smart, I will say. Yeah. So, which is allowed in the rules, it says it right in it. So, good for you. All right. So our next speaker is Pham, who is with RCAC, the Rural Community Assistance Corporation in California, and one of the 6 RCAP regional partners. And so she's going to talk about what you need to know about creating successful partnerships and outreach to private well owners.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm kind of losing my voice today, so I'll try to speak as loud as possible. So today I'll be talking about how to choose the most effective ways to outreach and how to form successful partnerships. Here's some questions you need to answer before you decide the most effective methods of outreaching. The first thing you need to do is really do your research first. So you need to understand the culture of the community and the demographic of your target audience. Information about demographics are information such as their education, their background, their racial diversity, and age group in that community. And you also need to understand who are your key stakeholders and what are their roles in assisting private well owners. These could be state or community leaders. And one good recommendation is asking the state or county regulators. They could have a list of the key stakeholders that you could outreach to. Who are your target audience? So where you should be outreaching. It's a good recommendation to familiarize yourself with local news and events in that area and familiarize with your hydrogeology issues in the area. Before you outreach, outreaching and research is really overlapping in a lot of ways because you're using your research to determine the most effective ways for outreaching. And while you're outreaching, you're also collecting information about the community as well. So one outreaching method that RCAC uses is creating a community group where we invited private well owners and well drillers together to get to know the community and understand what their challenges are for that community. It's a good opportunity to be able to network with the local community there. You want to make it a comfortable environment for them, so I wouldn't recommend inviting regulators to that meeting. If you do want to set up a meeting with regulators, state and county, I recommend having a separate meeting with them to talk about what you heard from your community meetings. Some methods of outreaching is the newspaper, email blasts, some social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor, or the bulletin board. There's so many different outreaching methods, but what's the best platform to use for your outreaching purpose? There's really no one-size-fits-all approach, so there's no one outreaching method that will work for all private well owners community. It really would depend on your specific community you're outreaching to. So it depends on the culture and demographic in that community. One of the best approach to outreaching is form successful partnership. Successful partnership meaning having a common vision in a short and most importantly the long term, and having active passion and commitment to assisting private well owners. One partnership we did was with the Julian and San Diego County Library. The reason why we chose them as a partner is because they were very supportive of hosting our well owner workshop in Julian, and pretty much the supervisor and also the librarian knew everyone in that town. We did some research, and the average age was around 60 years old, so it was a lot of retired folks who lived there and also middle-class families. So using the research we gathered, we determined the best method of outreaching is word of mouth. That's a very effective way of outreaching because imagine if you were to tell one owner about the workshop and they'd tell 2 others and the 2 others tell 2 others. It's a really exponential rate of outreaching. So using the outreach method, we were able to get 50 well owners show up at our well owner workshop. People were literally waiting by the door. So, choosing your partner wisely is really a difference between having a successful partnership or unsuccessful program. Not all partners are good partners, as you all know. Successful partnership means having good partner make a recommendation about your program really increases your credibility and gain the trust of the community because your partner recommended you and they're really trusted by the community. And really, I can't emphasize enough about the importance of a common vision. And a partnership is a shared effort and cost. So you really should sit down with your partner and talk about what you determine to contribute to the partnership. You should have a clear understanding, a win-win situation. So one of our very successful partnership is KNYE, which is a radio station in Nye County. Being on a radio station, really, it increases the interest of the well owners in our well assessment, and by them recommending us, it gave us a trust and reputation of our program, and it really formed the trust between the partners and the people in that community as well. So, they re-invited us on their radio station, and it really boosted our interest in that county. I would recommend avoiding conflicting partnership because trust and reputation is so important. Be sensitive to the culture of the community when making partnership. And that's what try to talk as fast as possible.
Thank you, T. Sorry about your voice. Come all the way from California, I tell you, no fun. Okay, so our next speaker is Eric Larsen from the Tri-County Health Department in Utah, who's going to talk about, I think you're the only county in Utah, you said, with regulations, right?
I asked around a little bit more, and there are a few others.
Okay, so. Well, at least it used to be there were none out west, really, so anyway, we'll let Eric give his presentation, and it's a different perspective coming from a state like Utah versus out east, what we've been hearing about all week.
And I'm also going to apologize for my voice. I've been battling a cough for a week and lost it about 2 seconds ago. So here we go. Like I said, my name is Eric Larsen. I am an environmental health scientist at Tri-County Health Department in Utah. I also run the water lab there. Give you a little bit of background. Utah is split up into 13 different health districts. Some are single county health departments and others, most of them are multi-county. Tri-County is in the dark blue in the upper right corner. We cover 3 counties as the name would indicate. We cover about 10,000 square miles and a population of about 60,000. And roughly a quarter of the population is not serviced by municipal water, or that would mean they're on private wells. So a few years before I came on board, Tri-County adopted its rules for non-public water systems. This essentially required potable water for every building, surprisingly, and focused a lot on private wells. The rule is kind of focused in 3 different sections. Well with 1 to 3 connections is considered a private well. Something with 4 to 7 connections is a non-public system. And then we also cover water hauling regulations. In the 1 to 3 connection section, we have a 200-foot protection zone required for private wells, unless that is granted to 100 feet, in which case the protection zone is reduced to 100 feet. We also address land use agreements if those protection zones cross property lines and whatnot. Whenever a new well is drilled, it's required to do a chemical and bacteriological analysis. It's a one-time test to make sure it's potable. You can see the chemicals that we're looking for. I didn't list the MCLs. We just get those from EPA. But there is no subsequent testing done. Just a one-time. Moving into the 4 to 7 connections, they have the same testing requirements, but we call these non-public wells. They're really pre-public wells or public systems. We're getting them ready to cross into that public water system, and so they have a lot of the similar construction requirements. We have a fair amount of hauling water in our area. It's permitted if no other source of water is available, or if the property is recreational without year-round access. So how do we regulate this? These private wells are tied to septic system permits. So you can't get a building permit without a septic system permit. You can't get a septic system permit without drinking water. So that's how we can regulate private wells. A few years ago, we had a family come stay in our area at a local ranch. They were fortunate enough to go home with E. coli, which prompted an investigation by us to see where that came from. And lo and behold, it was a water system. They were on a private spring. There were cows walking through that spring when we looked. And it wasn't just E. coli, they also got crypto. So we forced the ranch to connect to the public water system. There was a line running right through the road, their front gate. So subsequent to that, we realized there were a few holes in our regulation, and so we looked closer into commercial systems, commercial facilities. Also, one of the counties, the commissioners came to us and asked that we limit the number of dry lots that we permitted or permits for hauling water. And so we spent several months revising the rule. We came up with a plan, took it to the Board of Health, and then just a year ago, the revisions were adopted. And we focus a lot on commercial systems needing regular testing. We're still trying to figure out what regular means, quarterly, monthly, depends, we don't know. We also tightened down the hauling regulations. It's still allowed, but it's harder to obtain permission to haul water. And essentially, the homeowner must prove that a well is not feasible. Either it's too deep or the water's just not potable. And we were all excited about this, and the citizens said, no, let us haul water. There are a few public water systems that have fill stations that make it really convenient to just keep doing what they've always been doing and what everybody else is doing. There's also a big movement for off-the-grid living. A lot of people like to live in these tiny house sheds. And so we're having monthly conversations now with stakeholders of how to manage this hauling water movement. So I would welcome any suggestions or ideas that you have. Thank you.
Okay, so we do have some questions. We're going to do those first. If I don't mess this up. Okay, so for Andrea. Formerly, Florida governor and legislation stripped the ability of state scientists to consider climate change. Has that changed? Is Florida planning for sea level rise and more frequent hurricanes? Wow.
Yes, with Governor Rick Scott, we weren't allowed to, well, not me, I wasn't part of it. This was when I had left. I came back to UF. They weren't allowed to say the words climate change or sea level rise. It was called nuisance flooding. We since have a new, yeah. But the thing is that that has changed. You can now say climate change, and you can talk about sea level rise. And the thing is that regardless of what the governor was saying and the state was saying, the cities are already making plans. I mean, if you look at Miami, they're planning for everything. Coastal counties, it's all coming. So I live in the Florida Panhandle, and I was told when I started, oh, Andrea, you can never say the word climate change, no one will come, you can never say these things. But I'm realizing that, for example, in Pensacola and other places, they're seeing the effects. And so, yeah, there are science nights where you talk about climate change and things like that. So I think it is changing. Florida is planning. And I know we in Extension, a lot of us are starting to use the word climate change more often and feel more free.
Excellent.
Yeah. Plus, I have to say one thing. We're also told by the University of Florida that it's all science-based information. I mean, we're here to give science-based information, so we don't feel the same restriction.
All right, for T, how did you get in the radio partnership?
So the host actually contacted me because she saw an article that was submitted to the Pahrump Valley, which is a local newspaper in Pahrump, Nevada. And when I went on that radio station, we got a flood of calls from well owners about questions about the RCAC well assessment. And she invited me back as an going back to radio station, and she's very welcoming of us. If we have any upcoming workshop or well assessment visit to Pham, Nevada, tell her she welcomed me to kind of go back on a radio station and talk about it, and I could do that by phone as well.
Eric, you test for lots of heavy metals and toxic compounds. How often do you find detections or exceeded cessation of MCLs?
So I don't actually see a lot of heavy metals specifically. If we do see an MCL exceeded, we'll periodically get arsenic. There is a certain region of one of the counties that has high levels of sulfates, so there's just a bad aquifer right there that we're trying to find the edges of. We frequently get turbidity and TDS, and that's usually just a matter of flushing the well a little bit more. But if we do have one of those MCLs and we have them retest, flush and retest sort of thing, we'll then have them just put a filter on it, just some sort of treatment in that area. But we haven't actually seen a whole lot of heavy metals. I'm wondering if we should change our contaminants that we're looking for.
Sure. So Andrea, is Florida State Health Department paying for water testing being conducted? If so, do you know the funding source? Is it for all counties?
So under non-emergency situations, which is what I'm assuming you're talking about here in Marion County, that's a unique partnership that my colleague Ling has with the county health department. And I know that she has a maximum of 25 people that come to that class every month, and the health department pays for that. The specific funding source, do you know what it is? So if you didn't hear that, they take that funding from their annual budget, she said, that they set aside a portion for that. After emergencies, depending on whether or not the county declares itself in need of free well testing, then after emergencies, it's different, yeah.
Great. So Eric, based on your testing requirement, who's responsible for the testing? If it's the owner, is there follow-up to make sure the testing is performed?
Yes, the well owner is responsible for the testing, and that's where the permit comes in. We won't issue the wastewater permit until we've signed off on their samples. So we have the bottles, they can send them off to the state lab to do all the required testing. Then they turn the results in back to us, we'll look them over, and once everything's good, we'll sign off on that. We'll sign off on their wastewater system permit, and then they can go get occupancy from the county or whatnot. But we do hold their permit until we can sign off on their water.
Great. All right. Let's give these guys a round of applause. So we have 6 more lightning talks. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to do these 3, have some time for questions, use your Slido, and then we'll do the next 3 after that. So I also want to mention that we've had a couple requests for like a group going out possibly to play darts, pool, drink, or do whatever. I don't know if there's any place here to do that where a very large group could be accommodated, but start networking. If everybody's interested in doing that, we could probably find someplace, I would hope. So anyway, it's off the subject. We're going to go back to Sille. And so, yeah. Our next talk is Sille Larsen from the state of Vermont Department of Health on multi-objective partnership, an example from Vermont. I got to say, after our program last time, 2 years ago, where the theme was partnerships, we have a lot of folks talking about the partnerships that they've developed in the last couple of years, and it's actually really awesome. So, great.
All right. I'm not going to start until the slides get there because I've got it timed. All right. Well, hi. My name is Sille Larsen, and I'm the Water Resources Engineer with Department of Health in Vermont. And I'm here today to give you a short, and I swear, very quick presentation about this multi-objective partnership in Vermont. So what is it? It's called the Vermont Village Wastewater Solutions, and it's supposed to support rural communities with water and wastewater infrastructure planning and financing. So there's a lot of project partners that brings a lot of different skills and objectives to the table, and I would like to see this partnership as a type of alloy that where the combination of metals imparts synergistic properties to increase the overall strength of the end product. So there's a lot of different partners. There's multiple state agencies involved. There's local partners, regional, federal, and nonprofit partners involved. And Department of Environmental Conservation is sort of the coordinating member. We have Department of Housing and Community Development. We have Department of Health. We have Windham Regional Commission, we have RCAP Solution Vermont, and we have USDA Rural Development. So improved water and wastewater infrastructure typically supports multiple objectives such as improving economic health and vitality of rural villages. It protects public health, the environment, and helps make a village more climate change resilient. From a community development perspective, there's also multiple objectives: revitalizing village businesses, retain value of existing homes, and etc. So in Vermont, 63% of all villages rely on on-site septic systems, and 54% of Vermont villages have their own private wells. And so this partnership focuses on those villages with no centralized water and wastewater infrastructure. So it's really important to understand local drinking water quality, because water from private wells can be susceptible to contamination from on-site septic systems, from historic land use and development, and we don't have a lot of data from Vermont to sort of prove that's what's going on. So this is an example of a typical village in Vermont, and all the light blue shapes represent what we call well shields, which is the isolation distance from well to septic system to protect water quality. And as you can see in a village, that's really difficult to achieve. So this partnership also is an opportunity for the health department to reach out and talk to village residents about their private wells and engage in that type of conversation with people out there. So as you can see here, there's a lot of moving parts to the work done by this work group, but of course I am focusing on the efforts done to increase awareness about private well testing and treatment. The work includes a lot of coordination with partners such as Mark Johnson from RCAP Solutions Vermont, who's here today, local partners, the health department laboratory doing all the water analysis, and village residents as well. We developed a letter to send out to village residents to let them know about the overall project and to know about the opportunity to have their well water tested. And with that came a lot of questions, so we developed an FAQ document and a sign-up sheet as well as part of the project. So to determine whether nearby septic systems or naturally occurring contaminants are affecting water quality, we're really lucky right now to receive funding from CDC to provide free testing for these village residents. So during September of 2018, Mark Johnson went to Jamaica, Vermont to sample water from 11 homes. And you're thinking, wow, Jamaica, Vermont looks incredible. But that's just the island. There's just no Google photo of Jamaica, Vermont. So. Anyways, I received the result from the lab, and we analyzed and mapped the data. And in Jamaica, we didn't see any general contamination issue from septic systems. We saw one well with elevated levels of nitrate, chloride, and TC, and a couple of wells with elevated levels of gross alpha. So additional benefits to the health department with being part of this partnership, we get to sample water in rural, undersampled parts of Vermont, which we use to map a public or private well water quality, which we then share with our tracking program. And we also have a website under the Department of Environmental Conservation's website. And here I can share water and health information, and I can reach a much broader audience through this website. So that's a really great added benefit. So that was a very short and condensed version of introduction to this partnership, but one I'm really happy to be part of. And I just want to say thank you to all the project partners, to CDC, and thank you to you for listening.
Great job. Our next speaker is Bryan Swistock from Penn State Extension, and his talk is using a volunteer network to deliver water well education.
Yes, this is like terrifying because I'm a storyteller and giving me no clicker in 15 seconds. I mean, if I just curl up in a ball, somebody help me out, would you? Okay. Thanks. So I want to tell you about a volunteer program that we've used to try to help educate well owners in Pennsylvania through Penn State. We've done this program for about 15 years. It started as a pilot, and now it's more than a pilot. It's become a pretty good program over time. You might ask, why have we gone with volunteers? Well, it's really frustration. Had been doing this for 20 years and just kind of spinning our wheels. Too many well owners, too many problems, high rates of contamination, no regulations, as you've already heard before, even though we tried. And boy, I'd love to tell you stories about that, but I can't do that. We have a lot of unmotivated well owners, complacent. If the water turns on, it smells okay, they don't do anything. So we need proactive ways to get things out there to people so they understand things like lead and arsenic and nitrate that they don't smell and they don't taste and they don't know about. We have a lot of great resources. We don't need to create new things. We just need to find out better ways to get those things out to people. Every state has lots of good stuff out there, and we have our own good stuff, but we just need different mechanisms to get that out. And that's where we came up with the idea for the Master Well Owner Network, or we call it M1. Started 15 years ago, the idea being, let's train volunteers to be an army of people who can go out in the communities and give that basic information, be triage, basically. They can send the hard stuff to us, but they can deliver a lot of simple stuff, really. You wonder whether people will volunteer for this? Yes, and some of them are downright crazy. We have people that will dress up like a well to go to a Halloween party, you know? And there's a lot of them, 800, and that's just the people that we've accepted. We had probably double that for applications. We have a process. This is a formal program. So they have to go through an application, get accepted, they go through training and exams and continuing ed, and they have a policy that they sign that says they're going to follow the rules of this program. And the rules, you know, they're somewhat daunting to some people, but we want them to say, hey, we're going to be unbiased about this. We're not going to try to sell stuff. We're going to try to educate at least 50 people a year. We're going to tell you what we've done so that you can tell your funders what we've done. And we're going to give you liability insurance because we have to through the university so that if they say anything wrong, they're covered by liability insurance. Who volunteers? Not surprising, retirees are one of the big ones, but people that have well problems and they want to pass along and help other people that have well problems, along with all sorts of government folks, nonprofits, real estate people even help. Believe it or not, real estate. Funding sources, we have the state DEPs, the big one, the Pennsylvania Groundwater Association, EPA. It takes about $25,000 a year to run this program, and they give it to us each year, along with others that give us short-term projects. They do go through training. As I said, we provide about 6 to 8 hours of training. We used to do workshops on a Saturday. Now it's all online with videos, readings, and exams that they all do at their own pace at whatever time of the day or night that they want to. The key is we have to help them. We have to give them things, brochures, simple things to hand out, exhibits, something that they can use for their education, also people that they can talk to if they have questions, and you got to communicate with them. You got to give them newsletters, you got to give them webinars, continuing ed, and if you do that, they'll go out and talk to other people. That's their primary mechanism. They'll go educate through conversations. Some people will even do presentations at township meetings and other kinds of professional organizations. They'll do displays, and they'll even write articles. We have found the sweet spot for us has been about 200 to 300. So we've trained about 800, but about 200 to 300 active volunteers is a nice number that's easy to manage. And we train about 30 new volunteers each year because we find that about 30 volunteers kind of drop away each year. What we have found is that those volunteers educate about 3,000 to 5,000 well owners each year in Pennsylvania. That's about 50,000 people that we probably wouldn't have reached otherwise. And they give us about 2,000 hours, about 100,000 indirect contacts through things like newsletters. We even go out and survey people that they've talked to find out what do the homeowners think of this interaction. And you can see there the vast majority find that the volunteers are very helpful and they actually take action on their wells as a result of that interaction with the volunteers. The nice thing about this is it makes you more marketable to research as well because you now have an army of people all over the state that can get you access to water wells. So we've been able to attract about $700,000 of research funding basically because we had this group of volunteers out there. The good, we get good impacts. We can use it to leverage research dollars. Some of the volunteers are great. The bad is working with volunteers is hard. You got to have some money, and some volunteers are not too great. And luckily, that's a small percentage. The challenge is, and this is not unusual for our volunteer program, about 40% you never hear from. So about 60% actually do something, and that's typical. We get a lot of turnover. Not too many people have wells as their hobby, so this is all out of the goodness of their heart. And I'll leave you with, I've talked about a formal program, but just think about any well owner group you talk to. These are people that at least some percentage of them will probably help you deliver information. If you give them brochures, give them things, they can be an informal army of volunteers that might be able to help you out. Thank you.
Very good, very nice. All right, our next speaker is Erin Ling from Virginia Tech and Virginia Cooperative Extension about a children's program and youth engagement effort.
This is not the karaoke part though, right? Okay. Okay, good. Hi, I'm Erin Ling. I work at Virginia Tech and with Cooperative Extension. Most of what I do is manage an adult-facing well owner program, so I'm going to give a brief overview of that and then talk about how we've adapted that to reach youth and then their parents. It's kind of sneaky backdoor thing, yeah. All right. And I'll also acknowledge that we have a ton of other partners. We work with a network of 100 extension agents across the state, and I also work closely with Bryan Benham, who's an extension specialist in BSE at Virginia Tech. So our regular program is VAHAQUAPA, amazing acronym, the Virginia Household Water Quality Program. We conduct drinking water clinics in about 65 counties across Virginia every year, confidential and affordable testing for 14 parameters, and this is what we test for. But basically there's a value-added piece where we are interpreting the results for people and helping them solve problems as a result of what they've learned. We are a research lab, not state certified, and there is a cost associated with the program. It's $60 per kit. If I were to summarize our entire program in one slide, it's this. We help people figure out what's in their water, where it's coming from, whether it's a problem, and what they can do to address the problem. When we look at what we find in the water, this kind of matches up with what we've seen over the past few days, but we have quite a bit of total coliform bacteria, E. coli, and lead. Those are the big kind of unseen and concerning issues that we see across the state. Also quite a bit of nuisance contaminants, as you can imagine. And this program generates a lot of data. Quick snapshot, most people are only treating for aesthetic contaminants. Most people are not testing regularly. Wells are older, and this is the key that gets us to the youth program. The program is voluntary, and we are much better at reaching wealthier, older people in the state. So we developed this youth program working with rural high schools in Virginia. Blacksburg is in a pretty rural area, so those are the list of counties. We collaborate with a variety of science and agriculture classes. We have funding from RCAP and from Virginia Lakes and Watersheds Association to pay the cost of testing. So this is a group of students that has just arrived at Virginia Tech. These are rural kids that don't always get a chance to visit a college campus, so they actually collect their own water samples with parental consent and pack those with them on the bus and come to campus to visit us. We spend the first part of the day doing a variety of lab activities. So this is Asa, he's one of our lab analysts, and so that you can see they're learning how to use the pH meters. We also look at ColAlert as a method for detecting bacteria, and it's all very hands-on. So the students actually get to not only see what scientists are doing, they learn about other careers, and they learn about the science that they're learning in their classroom that they think has no purpose whatsoever. We're tying it to their own family's drinking water. And this is Kelly. She's our lab manager and an analytical chemist. So a lot of these students have never understood that there's something more they could do with their lives besides become a doctor or a lawyer or a veterinarian. So they're getting exposed to that. The second part of the time during their visit, we do things with our groundwater models. So these are Envision groundwater tabletop models where we can illustrate a lot of the concepts that we're talking about. We also do a lot just tying back to the water cycle and really simple concepts that they're learning in school and how that affects their water quality. I love it when the Virginia Tech students are available to come in and discuss their research. So these are kids that are much closer in age to the students that we're talking to. And again, they're doing real applied work. These two students are working with DEQ to look at Virginia's water supply plan, and they're talking to high school students about it. This is Mr. Fenton. He's one of our well drilling contractors who will come in. In these rural counties, a lot of times vocations are a good option for kids that are coming through these programs. So we're tying it to that too, in addition to them seeing, other scientific jobs that they could get. The best part of this program is that we actually return the results directly to the parents, so the kids aren't finding about E. coli at school. It's pretty scary, right? So the results go directly to the parents. The kids learn the information and help describe the summary results and interpretation to the parents and teachers. So they're actually part of that delivery. In the high school groups, we find higher levels of coliform and E. coli and of lead. So these are groups that were not reaching well with our program, potentially more impoverished homes. So there is a real need there. We are addressing SOLs. Students are performing 41% better on the post-test than they are on the pre-test. And students are learning about college majors and job options in STEM fields that they wouldn't learn about otherwise. We've brought high school students with us to conferences. We've gotten a lot of press for this program. So this is us and a couple of our collaborating teachers being covered in articles online and then on a local TV interview recently. People love the connection between the students and the kind of real life science. And this is Izzy. Izzy came 2 years in a row from Carroll County, which is very rural, and she is now studying water as a major at Virginia Tech, and she's minoring in Middle Eastern Studies. So she is our impact, she's amazing. She's also working in our lab. So this is a group of kids from Carroll County. The two guys on the end of the picture are well drillers who've come and supported us in talking to these kids. And so it's great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do have a number of questions, mostly for Bryan. So the first one is, how did you get rid of bad volunteers?
It's ugly, I'll tell you. We have a policy statement that we can remove volunteers as needed. I've never had to remove a volunteer. I mean, I've had to talk to some volunteers and tell them some things, but I've never had to remove one. But it's all part of the policy statement.
That's cool. At least you address it. Yeah.
Yes.
So are volunteers also master gardeners?
We have some master gardeners. We have some master watershed stewards as well.
And then are there any requirements for how many activities or volunteer hours people need to put in?
Yeah, unlike a lot of programs, we tie it all to how many people they talk to, not hours, not activities, but we say, again, we try to contact 50 well owners. We have some people that don't make it there, and we have some that go way beyond 50.
So for Erin, do students learn the results on site? I think you answered that, but have you had issues when students find out that they have contamination?
Yeah, so far we've been returning the results in the mail in a sealed envelope directly to the parents and then asking them to come back in for a meeting. In the meetings, just like we do with our regular program, we're discussing the results in a summary format, so we're not, specifically calling out any particular family. So far that's been doing a good job of protecting the confidentiality and especially not stigmatizing any poor. I mean, the last thing a teenager needs is something more embarrassing happening at school, right?
Okay, and also, Erin, do teachers apply for their students to be part of your program? Yeah. How do you connect with the schools to have them participate?
Right, so far we've met most of our collaborating teachers through another program called RET, which is where teachers come and work with a scientist on Virginia Tech's campus in their research lab for the summer as part of an experiential experience of their own. So that's how I've reached most of them. So they're already kind of tuned into water science and interested. They're connected with Virginia Tech to begin with. What I found is that this is an overwhelmingly appealing program. They're getting kids out of the classroom in a real lab to a college campus. So it's kind of like the floodgates in terms of the amount of funding I can find to cover the samples. I can find that many more teachers to work with. So we've probably tested 350 families' water through this program since 2015. As we get more press, we get more offers for funding, and we can bring in more students. So it's just growing pretty much exponentially for now.
Great. All right. Thank you, guys. Okay. Last three. I'm sure it'll be great. Yeah. No, everybody just had a snack. They're all happy. Okay, so our first speaker is Shannon Harrower-Nakama from the Rhode Island Department of Health, and talking about a different type of engineer using in-grouping to reach private well owners.
Yeah, sorry for whoever's after me. I am a hulking 5'1". But yeah, as I said, my name is Shannon Harrower-Nakama. I'm from the Rhode Island Department of Health Private Wells Program. So there we go. Awesome. Today I'm going to talk about our efforts toward getting the state invited to the metaphorical cool kids table of private well homeowners and the ways that we've been doing that through different outreach means. Social psych tells us our world's divided into two groups, the people we are more likely to speak to or trust, and literally everyone else. It's often used in reference to things like race or gender, but here we're generalizing to community as a whole. State governments beyond outgroup, we're associated with punishing or complaints, and we're not the first ones you go to for help or with questions, and we should be. We have information, we have resources, but yelling, "Your taxes obligate me to love you," doesn't really help as far as that goes. So why are we banished to outer space? A couple of the stereotypes: we're regulators on power trips, we're nerds who only use jargon, some people don't know what we do, so they assume we do nothing, and it's a concerning amount of spying, which if they saw our budgets would be funny. The results are not surprising to anyone. It's risky, there's some health information or bad information, and that can leave scared people vulnerable. Plus, like if you type in your symptoms to Google and it turns out to cancer, same with wells. This is where in-grouping comes in. You can have all the resources in the world, but if people aren't talking to you first, what you're doing is triage. So we needed to get into that social role, that in-group, that first spot. Best way to do that is with an in, and we had one. So URI has been a huge part of this. They've already been a household name, excellent academics. We have a partnership going with them, and there were a lot of factors primed to help us with this outreach that we were trying to get off the ground, starting with workshops. Now, these are great. They go to more rural areas with more wells, and Allison McCann from URI conducts these in familiar settings in small groups with exercises and handouts. I go when I can, introduce myself, help, and engage, and people remember that. Also, grad students. Awesome, I'll talk later. And some of you may have seen these before. These are the materials sheets that we developed with URI. But the important part is a downgraded branding. It gives well owners a chance to absorb the information without government. And we're at the bottom, we're the helpers, and it changes the role. Other things we do, we coordinate attendance to things like the home show, town halls, listening sessions, and we find information gaps and help fill them in. Other things, it's good for people to see us on this side of the desk to discern more or less what we actually do. Plus, sampling's only half the battle. Interpreting results can be daunting, and that's where the tag team comes in. I interpret for the state labs, and Allison's our treatment expert. And so that turns it into a team supporting the homeowner rather than a single authority telling you about your water. Splitting the workload also leaves more time for communication. Not feasible for everyone, but I'm able to build up a great response toolbox, like VOCs are like penguins, or lab surrogates are like weddings. So I was reachable and understandable. The effects are pretty straightforward and significant. We were more effective, communicating better, and if we were people's first stop or close to it, we got more information as to the ways they instinctively looked for answers, and that helps us improve on things like our networks and website. One validating experience was about a year after finding PFAS in private wells. Someone moved in, heard a few things, and called us, quote, before Googling it and scaring the shit out of myself. Because I've seen you guys around, you probably know stuff. We beat Google. That's goals. So we can look at the success in two ways. Cultural scientific. First, Rhode Island is definitely land of, I know a guy. Like, you got a well thing, before you give Home Depot a dime, you call Shannon on the hill. She knows all the science stuff. She got you. How's your car? You need tires? Like, we just fit into that social narrative. From the science side of things, like electricity, humans take the path of least resistance. If something's already in your brain, you're going to want to do that insistently, automatically. So by having resources, info sheets, and programs, we're validating and reinforcing that path. People come right back to us. Also, everyone's our network. Keywords like, I lived here 30 years, or I'm on the PTA. I let people know they can print and share things we talk about. Building officials, local officials are more likely to be people's neighbors or first contacts. And we even offer realtors a private well course for CEUs. Also, almost no one follows official government anything, so jump in on your popular partners' feeds. If you keep records of calls and emails, mine those for data. If possible, even, have a message or language for, I'm doing a thing, but I heard you, and come back to it. The dogs are cute, but an apt metaphor for what we're trying to do here. It's not just building trust or good branding or being approachable, though those help. We're trying to make it second nature for the people you're reaching to turn to you and shift your social role. Rhode Island's small and unique, so I know these don't work for everyone, but it's allowed us to get out ahead of a lot of things to help more effectively and respond to surprises, like a toddler with a socket wrench, or a hurricane, and hopefully more in the future.
Thank you, Shannon. Our next speaker is Captain Alex Daly from the Indian Health Service. He's going to talk to us about addressing drinking water concerns for individual homes and tribal communities.
All right. Well, hey, everyone. I'm Alex Daly. I work with the Indian Health Service Division of Sanitation Facilities Construction, and like Steve said, I'm going to talk a little bit about how our program addresses drinking water concerns for individual homes in tribal communities. Some of the objectives of what I'm going to talk about are to briefly explain who we are, what we do, and where the program is going as it relates to private wells in particular. One thing we do is put in a lot of private wells. This is photos from a new home site in California. So our program was established in 1959 through the passage of Public Law 86-121. That's the Indian Sanitation Facilities Act, which gave the Surgeon General authorization to provide water, sewer, and solid waste facilities for Indian homes and communities. I'm going to tell you a lot more about how we got put together as a program some other time. But some of our program's activities include maintaining an inventory of sanitation deficiencies. We have offices around the country that work closely with tribal communities to do that. Congress provides us with funding to build individual and community sanitation facilities. We do that through the development of projects to address those deficiencies that we identify. And we also can provide technical assistance to homeowners and utility organizations to support those facilities. Let's see. So on-site wells, there it is, are one example of the facilities we can deliver. We recently estimated that around 17 to 18% of tribal homes are on private wells. That's a little bit higher than the national average. That amounts to about 70,000 homes, or about 750,000 people. So it's a pretty good share, or pretty good coverage. So this graph shows our program's total funding allocation in recent years. You can see that we got a big bump in our funding, going from about $100 million to $190 million nationally in 2018. We expect that to continue for 2019 and possibly going forward. Infrastructure is always popular. A rough estimate of the portion of this that goes toward private wells is maybe 20 to 40 million per year. Kind of fluctuates from year to year depending on the needs that are identified and the priorities that tribes put on them. One thing we really focus on when we provide on-site wells is the site planning and construction quality. We do an on-site review with the driller and homeowner prior to the home being brought on site or constructed when possible. We also do inspection and water quality testing. We work with the homeowners to help them understand the O&M requirements. We walk them through startup and testing, and we have them sign an agreement to make sure they formally accept the ownership of those facilities and agree to operate and maintain them going forward. So some of the other things we can do, we can provide some limited technical assistance for existing wells. We respond to a lot of calls to troubleshoot failed wells, and we can bring in contractors to help make recommendations and perform repairs when the applicant is eligible. In my 2.5 minutes remaining, I want to talk a little bit about some of our program's ideas and directions going forward. These include improving our ability to identify needs, expand our reach, and adapt to new regulations. To improve our needs identification, we're looking at standing up a national GIS platform and integrating our facility information with water quality data and other asset information. I saw a lot of great examples from you guys today and yesterday. This is a big project, and we're at least a decade behind standard industry practice when it comes to GIS. So we do have a fairly extensive data system. It's called STARS that we've been using for 15 to 20 years now. Includes information on all of our projects, locations of homes served. So we're trying to bring in some of that additional information. Expanding our reach, so we've been working hard to partner with technical assistance providers like you guys and other funding agencies to leverage our collective expertise. One example, my colleague in the back of the room there, David, was here 2 years ago to talk about a partnership that we have with Johns Hopkins University to install point-of-use devices for homes with wells that are high in arsenic. We're also providing public health messages on their use and maintenance and doing follow-up testing to do exposure monitoring to determine their effectiveness. That work's ongoing. We expect some publication of that soon. Adapting to newer regulations. So our challenge is a national organization that's highly decentralized and spread out. We work in remote communities, and there's like a multitude of water quality regulations and standards that apply. Our local staff, are sometimes in one-man shops in these field offices, and they're kind of on their own to understand what regulations apply, what resources are available, and how they can get in touch with folks that can help. That's where you all can come in. So the bottom line is, that our program, we have a responsibility to help provide for the public health of tribal communities. We have a huge area to cover and a lot of work to do. So any of you that work with those communities, we'd love to hear from you and talk about how we can work together. And my contact info is in the slides, or not in the slides, in the binder. And we'll be here, the rest of today and tomorrow. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and we hope to hear more from you going forward.
All right, thank you. Our last presentation, not least, is Jennifer Fetter from Penn State Extension, talking about teaching kids wellhead protection through manure management.
This is a real appetizing conversation right before dinner. We'll talk about animal poop. Which I am a water resources educator with Penn State Extension, but I have spent the past 2 years spending a lot of time teaching kids about manure management. And if you remember my talk at the conference in Champaign, if you were there, I did give a talk about reaching adults through youth. I'd like to claim Erin's talk as impact as a result of that, but I know she already knew how to work with youth before she heard from me. But you might remember at the time I referred to kids as little miniature agents of change, and they are highly effective. The reason I like working with youth as much as I do is because adults get super boring educational resources like our guidance manual on managing manure to meet compliance in Pennsylvania. It's a wonderful book, but it is applicable to what we're doing in wellhead protection, because included in Pennsylvania's manure management laws is a 100-foot setback for manure application around wellheads. And here in Pennsylvania, I looked at the map outside in the lobby, noticed a lot of you are from around this region, so you've probably heard the words Chesapeake Bay muttered in your career. We do have an issue here in Pennsylvania with achieving our goals to meet nutrient reductions that are required by the TMDL, the EPA put forward. So we've been doing a lot to elevate manure management education in the last few years. We're taking regulations that have always existed and just kind of adding more accountability for them. We're especially out right now, that came up fast, looking at farms that are smaller scale, the hobby farms, not the CAFOs, and that includes our youth that are involved in 4-H and FFA programs raising animals. They need manure management plans too to be in compliance. So we decided that we'd go ahead and create a curriculum that was way more fun than the DEP Manure Management Manual. Help kids understand the impacts of manure on the environment, how to get their plans written, how to be in compliance. So we had some funding from DEP to help us do this. It's a great curriculum. It's loaded with why manure is a great resource, the important soil nutrients, but this is really secretly a water quality curriculum. We spend most of the impact section talking about water quality, and because I was in charge of this project, I had the opportunity to really build in a lot of wellhead protection and sort of well awareness into the curriculum. So there's some activities in there that might look familiar to those of you who have worked with Enviroscape models, but we kind of cheap it down to easily available materials. Use Kool-Aid as manure. We spray it with a spray bottle. Notice the little straw sticking out of the sponge. There is a little well drilled right down through the sponge. So looking at how if you stack your manure right next to your wellhead, it's a problem. But this is my favorite activity in the book. We give the kids maps and markers, and we talk about things that they have to mark on the map that's in their manure management plan. So they color in environmentally sensitive areas like the creeks and the ponds and the drainage swales that are on the farm, and we talk about if you stack your manure near those resources, what the impacts might be and why that might not be a good place. And this is kind of modeling one of those little hobby farm type of farms where they don't have crops to spread their manure, so they're going to be stacking it somewhere before a hauler gets there. We talk about steep slopes, so they color in all the steep slopes and why you might not want to be stacking your manure where you have exaggerated runoff. We also encourage being good neighbors. Our setback requirements for spreading on fields include property boundaries, but it's not actually written into stacking laws. But we do mark the property boundaries as well. And then we ask the kids, where would you stack your manure? And I actually had one boy come right out and ask me, which side of the barn is the door on? So they're just going to put it in the most convenient place. But obviously, we haven't talked about the wellhead marked very clearly on this map yet. So we do talk about the 100-foot zone of protection. If you notice on the left-hand side of the map, there's a scale. So we have them draw in that 100-foot circle, and lo and behold, where most of them want to stack their manure on their farm is right inside that 100-foot circle. So it leads to great conversations. We talk a lot about what that might mean and how they need to rethink that. Then we get them on tablets. They look at Google Earth. They look at their own property. They try to remember where their wellhead is and start thinking about what's on their own land and what might be in that 100-foot circle, because of course, as we've heard a couple hundred times today, there are no regulations in Pennsylvania. And then if we have the opportunity, we go outside and look at the wellhead wherever we are. This is a great wellhead we saw earlier this spring, and I let the kids tell me what's wrong, and they weren't too slow to identify the holes drilled directly in the side of this otherwise sanitary well casing. And kids love to point out to their parents what they're doing wrong. You've probably had some experience with that. So they are effective agents of change. The curriculum's online. It's free, downloadable PDF if you're interested. And if the link disappears, which it will, ask me and I can send it to you. So thank you very much.
All right. Any questions for these three speakers? I have none here. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. I have a couple announcements. You stay here. You're going to draw, if you don't mind. You're going to draw? Just draw one of those. So quickly, I have a few announcements. One, for those seeking CEs, someone will be at the table out here till 5:30 if you want them to sign. It's worth 6.5 CEs today. If not, and you're going to be here tomorrow, you can get it signed tomorrow because we'll be here. Also, all the slides from the lightning talks are not in your binder, but we either are or just did send them to everyone who's listed as attendee as a PDF, so you have them. And as far as tonight, for Ginger and others who are interested in going somewhere, there is a place called Sawyer's, I understand, that's open. It's an open air area. I don't know how cold it's supposed to be tonight, but it's probably our best bet if everybody wants to get together and mingle. So anybody who's interested, say 8:30, 9 o'clock after supper. Some of us will be at Ginger's. We'll be at Sawyer's, which is down 2nd Street on the left side of the street. And it's a big open bar. So lastly, most importantly, we have an E. coli. Oh, I have to do it? You just didn't want to read the name. Yeah. Okay. Steve Spade. Uh-huh.